Shocking news out of Montecito. Prince Harry has reportedly caught Meghan red-handed in a scandal that has left the royal world stunned. According to explosive claims, Meghan has been thrown out after Harry discovered her cheating with an older man. This revelation has sparked outrage, heartbreak, and whispers of the ultimate royal betrayal. Stay with us as we uncover the full story behind this dramatic downfall. The setting sun cast a golden hue over Montecito, coloring the Pacific horizon in shades of orange and violet. The streets were peaceful and quiet, a peacefulness others scale back to multi-million-dollar homes, and their oversized manicured yards were tucked behind the gates of the most sought-after address in the area. To the outside world, the Sussex apartment was a closely held confidant, a melange of Mediterranean luxury with a promise of privacy behind white stucco walls and ornamental wrought iron balconies. But within its walls, a storm appeared to be brewing that could ruin it all, it was rumored. Prince Harry was soon to have his own beliefs about his life and his marriage and his partner put under the microscope. What should have played out as an ordinary afternoon took several curious detours as Meghan buzzed in and out of the house all week, managing a deluge of charity business, brand meetings, and mysterious phone calls that Harry strained to listen in on. Harry, who first put Meghan's busyness down to her work schedule, realized that the mood in the household had changed that day. Maybe it was the casually discarded purse on the kitchen center as she rushed upstairs, or its insistent rumblings coming from elsewhere, rapidly vibrating in protest of the disturbance to come. Harry, as he was rather unused to minding his own business, was, whether from pure curiosity or from malice, surprisingly curious. Each time he moved the bag near him, a recurring vibration drew his attention. Among the familiar items like lip balm and a pair of sunglasses, he found a second phone, different from her usual phone. It lay there before him, new and unopened, and he found himself salivating. Why had she had it, and why had she kept it so silent? He tried to convince himself otherwise, but as he unlocked the screen he saw loads of missed messages from unknown numbers under unknown names. A knot formed in his stomach at the preview of one message. The second had him sucking in a breath, and the third was utterly explicit. Explicit words. Late-night confessions in a voice that wasn't light. It was not a friendship or a flirtation, but pure and unadulterated intimacy. His thumb hovered over the screen, as if the phone were searing hot. Still, he couldn't look away. He scrolled. There were also images, anything but innocent. Not the kind of photos you'd want your partner sharing with anyone else. The world around him blurred. The kitchen walls, the murmur of the ocean, the warm light pooling by the window, it all receded into the background. All he heard was the steady thumping of his heart in his ears. Frozen with the phone in his hand, torn between disbelief and the suffocating realization that this life he believed so sturdy might well be erected on sand. Question after question filled his already oversaturated brain. Who was this man? For how long had this been going on? That had been why Meghan had been drawing back, her excuses of space now ringing differently in his ears. And most agonizingly, was their marriage ever really what he thought it was? Or had he, unknowingly, performed in someone else's script? During the entire process, he listened to the sounds overhead. Or perhaps it was just the slow, purposeful steps of Meghan, talking as if she were shopping around for a call or for her next move. Harry immediately set the bag on the counter, but still gripped the phone. This time he didn't even bother hiding it. Approaching the bottom of the staircase, his eyes were fixed on the landing where he stood, accompanied by an aspirant of the stairs' full length and a small, trapped breath. Her features softened instinctively as she materialized. Her friendly, polished smile, used in public, wavered as she noticed what he held. For an instant, her eyes darted to the phone before turning back to him. That single flicker only confirmed what he already knew. The shield was slipping, in place of something more tenuous, less straight-laced. Initially, neither uttered a word. Silent accusations crackled in the air. Harry gripped the phone he was holding. Meghan's jaw tightened. Once an escape from the paparazzi and media, it now seemed the most dangerous place on earth. Here, there were no cameras, no filters, no carefully calibrated mask. Nothing was left except truth, simmering beneath the surface. He wanted to shout, make her admit it right there in the corridor. Years of scrutiny, of keeping order among the chaos, kept his voice pinned, meandering, nearly casual. He had asked one simple and undiluted question. She provided no answer. Instead, she sidestepped him. Her silence was telling, louder than any denial. She disappeared into another room and Harry hesitated for so long that it felt like years. The phone stayed in his hand, its screen darkened now, but the images and words seared into his mind. Nothing could be denied no matter which way this ended. Trusting had been broken, the marriage agreement destroyed, in personal way. At that very minute, one icy realization formed in his mind: they were not just arguing but the start of the end. The weeks leading up to the disclosure in Montecito seemed steady to the rest of the world. Their neighbors have observed them coming and going through the estate gates, Meghan in oversized shades and chic, understated clothes, Harry in a baseball cap with a plain t-shirt. Life in California felt like the dream they wanted to create when leaving the UK. Tranquility, privacy, and a hard-won independence to live as they please. But for those clued in, there were subtle hints early in that seemed minor at the time but glaring now. It began with conflicting calendars. Meghan would leave early to attend the meetings without telling Harry where she was going, saying vaguely she was going to meet someone linked to the foundation or an investor interested in a project. At first, Harry, who was used to her crazy work schedule, didn't find anything odd in their union. For one, Meghan was the one with a sprawling network, filled with media, activism, fashion, and politics types. And gradually the length of her absence increased. Her returns became increasingly late, her mood oscillating between bubbly and unfocused, her mind seeming to be elsewhere. Their days together, which had long been shared routines, started to fracture. Coffee chats in the morning became rare as Meghan began taking calls privately in the garden or barricading herself away in her home office, ditching their dog walks. Harry, who so valued these natural rhythms as a refuge from the bustle of their existences, began to feel it in ways he could not shape at once into words. He told himself she was just under pressure. Their public life was a thicket, minutely covered by a media that longed to see a stumble or contradiction. They noticed his edginess, the way his conservations were clamped shut in a tight fist. Once he was sure of the privacy of where he was and attributing his misery to exhaustion from work, being a dad and Prince Harry, yes, even in what he thought was a private environment Harry was unable to pinpoint exactly what was upsetting his brother. Unable to put a finger on it, he just knew that there was a change of atmosphere about them. And in their lives, Montecito itself felt as if it were a character. In this tranquil private community, famed celebrities in the area casually socialized, shopping at neighborhood markets unnoticed, and extravagant multimillion-dollar houses discreetly hidden in lush shrubbery. It was designed as their sanctuary, a peaceful sanctuary from the prying eye of London's tabloids and the chilly walls of royal palaces. They chose it precisely because it was the antithesis of the life they had left. But even in paradise, the walls can start closing in when secrets hang over them. Harry was becoming aware of slight behavior changes in Meghan without even doing so consciously. She would walk outside phoneless, leaving her primary phone on the kitchen counter. He noticed that she started to lock off the door to her home office, which she never did. Her abrupt hang-ups when he walked into a room, explained as short callbacks or dealing with PR people at her end, stayed with him. They were thought to go out for a scheduled dinner that evening. After a week of their individual agreements, Harry decorated the outside patio with candlelight, as the soft sea breeze swept and scented the air with jasmine. 1 hour before Meghan was spotted at the front door, perfectly put together if a little flustered, saying she needed to reschedule. A last-minute, virtual meeting on Zoom with a potential brand partner had come up. He didn't engage in a debate. Enty Moynihan he didn't say any of this to her, he simply nodded and took a swallow of his beer, except that he supported her projects, and that was all that mattered. That wasn't enough, then that was on her. I'll see you tomorrow. Drinks are on me in celebration of your new book. He smiled and picked up his beer. It's late, better get home and write a few chapters so I can sign at your book release party in a few months. But as he dined solo that night, the flavors fell strangely flat. Harry's lifelong education in sniffing out contradictions, even when cloaked in niceties and flattery, clattered in his head. Notice the details, notice the details. If a strawberry seller in the crowd was fiddling with the brim of his hat, there was a reason for it. He didn't act on it right away, but he felt those contradictions whispered in little lies of omission, half-truths, fragmented stories that didn't make sense together. It was as if his sixth sense were neatly filing them away, until it would all somehow, some way, come together. What he didn't know yet was that this moment of peace, if that's what it was anything but typical. It was like the unspoken lull before a storm, the kind that sat thick in the air. Little did he know that, just as the storm was about to hit, their marriage was precariously positioned on fault lines. One revelation could cause the ground to split open beneath them, and it was fate that the revelation was now on its way, snug and hidden in the lining of a handbag, waiting to be discovered at a time when things couldn't be worse, or possibly better. There would be no turning back by the time it reared its head. One of those lazy afternoons in Montecito, when the sunlight lazily washed over everything, and when it swept across the kitchen it turned it golden, the house lay peaceful. Meghan had only recently arrived back from what she described as a quick lunch meeting, but Harry had seen no evidence of lunch. No takeaway remains, no lingering smell of food, nothing. She breezed in with a breezy smile, giving him a peck on the cheek before floating upstairs with an unnatural cheerfulness that felt practiced. Keeping her purse ajar on the kitchen island was her modus operandi, the perfect place to leave your purse when you get home from work. But it was the slight vibrating coming from within the car that caught Harry's attention this time, and the particular ring sounded off from inside, one that did not belong to her regular phone. The muffled, high-speed buzzing suggested a device designed not to be seen or heard. Harry shook off the consideration initially by filling a glass with water and looking out the garden. But as the rattles continued, each one coming more quickly and more insistently than the last, Harry's interest was piqued. Maybe it was a backup work phone, but he had a sneaking suspicion. Never in their time together had he seen Meghan with a second phone. That they both hated more than one gadget made this mystery only more mystery. Trying to juggle his curious tendency with respect for her privacy and failing, he made turns around the bag, the force of suspicion pulling at him as if it was going to unravel his patience. At the third vibration, his hand had automatically responded. The cell phone was smooth and modern, not like the one she normally used. It was unprotected, it was a glistening jet black under the light. Tapping at the screen to light it up, he was greeted with a screen of a lock screen locked with notifications flooding in from unknown, unfamiliar and uncolleague-type sources. The messages themselves were a strange mishmash of numbers, random single letters, emojis, and partial words that seemed to make no sense on their own. The moment Harry looked at it, his stomach lurched. With every fiber of his being he did not want to, even though he knew he could not help but take something with him, something changed, something that would never be right again, and something inside drove him on, the soldier, the son, bruised by past deceptions. His thumb paused for a moment, then slid along the screen and unlocked. The patient messages followed a continuum of nature. The first was cryptic, suggesting that two people shared a secret connection. That was followed by a longer message filled with flattery and promises that made his jaw clench. Towards the third message, conversation turned to vulgar, and the images practically hit him like a physical punch to the gut. These were not benign conversations, nor were they old. A few of the recent interactions had timestamps, some were from that very morning, others were only days old. The people he had called on were nothing to him by themselves, but strung together, they told a story. Long talks, late-night walks, calls all night long and ending at sunup, Harry went on, looking for a context that would explain these bizarre revelations. There were no signs of it. With every clue he took in, a gnawing sickness welled up from the depths of his belly. There he found pet names and inside jokes, and plans for upcoming trysts in undisclosed locations she'd never shared with him. One detail gave him pause, a location pin shared in a message that came from her to someone else, showing that she was at a cafe miles away. On the day she continued to insist she was in Los Angeles and hopping from one meeting to the next. He could still remember when she had come late once. Traffic was a total mess, she had said. He had believed her without a doubt then. Now that memory had reformed into an acute, bitter awareness. For a second Harry wanted to throw her phone away and stuff it back in her bag, until it never existed. But the images and words were already seared in his brain, impossible to erase. The evidence was before him, and he knew enough to see that it was no accident. This was a secret, an aspect of her life she had chosen to keep hidden. He had been deliberately kept in the dark about it. Slamming the phone onto the counter, he rubbed his face. The house suddenly seemed too big, too empty. He could hear water running somehow distantly upstairs. Meghan taking a shower, unaware of the storm that had descended just a floor below. Pondering the notion of rushing up this second and facing her down while she was still rinsing, forcing her to answer for herself and have no place to flee, he half wished himself some time to think first, time to plan his approach to very possibly the most important conversation of his marriage. Instead, he picked up the phone again. Some part of him even wanted to ask more questions now, to be certain beyond a doubt before he spoke words that couldn't be unsaid. Every tap and swipe only confirmed his instinct's shrill alarms. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was betrayal, enacted with studied, intimate purpose. His fingers were lingered on the phone even after she walked downstairs, his eyes on the phone still but his mind somewhere else. Matter recoiled years of memories through a new, brutal lens. His hidden second phone had gone from an object to a key revealing a version of his life that he had never intended to live. Harry stayed in the kitchen, holding the second phone firmly as it pressed into his hand. Meghan's shufflings up there, the rattling of drawers, the muffled closing of wardrobe doors, seemed to hang like a charged atmosphere in the house. The silence amplified each footstep's creak on the floor, it was amplifying his already thunderous heartbeat. But he couldn't hang up the phone right away. Something had eroded the lock screen's barrier. He had a peek earlier, but his search required more. To have it out with her, he required everything there was to know, every number, every name, every word, every image, every timestamp. Then he could face her and make certain she couldn't twist truth beyond all recognition. The first conversation he initiated was with a number listed in his contacts as A, which began with the standard back and forth about their schedules, travel plans, and mutual friends. But things turned into a confessional from the get-go. Harmless banter became salacious invitations tinged with in-jokes suggesting common experiences. Harry's stomach knotted when a series of explicit messages suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Attached images were even more disturbing. Not glossy, posed social media pics, but private, weak moments that were specifically intended to be taken in that exact posture and that exact light, and it was clear why. These pictures also left no question that they were new. Harry recognized the clothes she had worn in the past weeks, and the familiar rooms in the background. When he dug deeper, he found voice notes. Although hesitant, he played one. Meghan's voice, a low, playful one intended for private occasions, whispered intimate words, as if to someone other than herself. Harry terminated the recording and distanced himself from the telephone for an instant. It was magnetic and drew him back. His focus flickered back as his hand reached into opening new chat with a different identity once again, now a man's, last name completely foreign. The dialogue was daring, almost heedlessly so, with mentions of secret rendezvous and weekend plans that, disconcertingly, coincided with times she would say she was out on business. And even hotel reservations that were confirmed in messages from an alias they both knew, but was not hers. But one message made him pause. It included a screenshot of a boarding pass the man had sent to her. And that destination was a city she had never said she had ever visited before. That date happened to be the same weekend she told me she'd be in San Francisco raising money for a charity. He still remembered that weekend, when she came back with glossy, happy-looking event photos and the joy of making speeches. Now he couldn't help wondering how much of it had been a show, a play to hide where she really was. The actual weight of what he was revealing sat upon him, a palpable thing. It wasn't just that she had been talking to someone else, but the extent of it, the organization, the regularity, the intimacy. Harry's mind went to the small, quiet shifts he noticed months before, the locked office, the sudden trips, the times she seemed anxious to see him when he came home. All of those had been the red flags he'd elected to not pay attention to, and now they all snapped into place like fragments of a puzzle he had been too scared to solve. Digging through your most recent messages from just a few hours earlier, he found, and sat and read for a few minutes, a series of texts about last night, how the next time would be even better. An unclear but still personally intimate picture was part of it, and he felt a mix of anger and disbelief. He read the messages again. Harry leaned back against the counter, his hand squeezing the phone hard, almost as if daring the words into something unfamiliar. He wanted to throw it across the room, watch it smash into shards against the tile floor. But another part of him wanted it to stay the same, an unchangeable testament protected from denial or erasure. Motionless, he remained that way for an unknown period of time before the sudden silence overhead warned him that she was drawing near. Her footsteps approached slowly, sounding along the corridor and out onto the staircase. There was a strange, quiet confidence that came over him, created from the melding of determination and rage. He positioned the phone, screen up, on the counter and left it facing up, a tacit dare for her to find when she arrived, an unapologetic standoff. He was so damn stubborn, but he knew how she wouldn't react when she learned the truth. Seeing Meghan come into the kitchen, her eyes were at first directed over the telephone. Her eyes flicked towards Harry, who was standing quite still by the counter, and had a kind of granite about his person. The moment her eyes fell upon the thing, a recognition flashed across her face and in the next instant it was gone. A slight hardening around her lips was all that Harry caught. She caught her breath for a moment, her face gleamed with neutrality. No words were exchanged immediately. Harry was deliberately not speaking to encourage her to break the silence first and see how she reacted. Meghan looked at the phone, back at him, as if to say something, but remained silent. She moved toward the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of seltzer water with a lack of effect that felt rehearsed, like an actor bumping into her marks on a stage. When she next opened her mouth, it wasn't in an explanation but in measured question, her voice completely neutral. Harry held the phone up and swiveled the screen for her to see an exposed message thread. The name at the head of the list, however, was perfectly plain, devoid of celebrity, of political distinction, but full of infinite ability, of countless resources, beneath its plotting disguise. Who is he? Harry's voice was soft and Meghan stared at the screen, feeling too intoxicated to ask him what he meant with that question and where did his phone come from. Her gesture said it all, her distance frustrating as she grasped for the phone and their hands but met with some resistance as they brushed against each other, reminding of their unresolved tension. Her opening answer also danced around the truth, it's complicated. Harry's jaw tensed in disagreement. It's not complicated. Who is he? She took her hand back, looking guilty. It was someone she knew, someone she had reconnected with on purpose. A paradox decently concealed behind an exact sentence. Harry had been taught to detect such nuances, to hear not just what was said, but also what was not. His name in the message thread triggered a memory. He had seen it somewhere before, though he could not place it. It wasn't a name that ever came up in the same social circles, leaving only two options: someone local she'd met and not told him about, or someone from her past risen from the dead. "Why did he send you this?" Harry asked, opening one of the crude messages and placing the screen between them. Meghan's jaw clenched, but she did not pull away. "We've been talking," she barely replied. "It was not supposed to mean anything." Almost chuckling, Harry remembered there wasn't anything funny about this moment after all. "If it doesn't mean anything, you don't send photos like this to someone." The silence that followed said more than any spoken admission. Harry studied her features, looking for some regret, fear, shame. Instead, he witnessed a mental calculus at work, a flying judgment of how much to tell him, what story to spin, and how to deliver the news in a way that would soften the blow. He chose not to give her that chance. "I know the hotel," he said, "the trips I'm on. I know the 1 a.m. phone calls, so don't sit here and try downplaying what happened." Iota 24H News. See also, subscribe. The Daily Beast. NBC News Digital is a collection of innovative and powerful news brands that deliver compelling, diverse and engaging news stories. The edge in his tone startled her. She blinked, then looked away, focusing behind his shoulder. This was when he noticed another thing. She had not even asked him how much he had found. That meant she already had some idea that the stuff on the phone was at least pretty incriminating, and explanations would be a waste of breath. And as Harry looked back over specific dates and inconsistencies with regard to her schedule, the charge of the man became clear. "A weekend on which she told me she was meeting a documentary maker in New York and there were no photo, cell phone calls, WhatsApp or Facebook action to support it. A charitable event." She had first said she was on inevitable business, but he had later found jet receipt for those very same dates, a name other than hers on the receipt, but that man had a voice my friend recognized from the phone guy. This wasn't an acquaintance but someone she had been working with, someone privy to her activities over the course of months, if not even longer. That Harry had not been aware of him until now showed how carefully she concealed him. The feeling was beyond nude photos and dirty texts. It wasn't just physical betrayal but the deliberate fashioning of a secret narrative within the life they shared together. As they portrayed one public facade, she'd been cultivating an entirely different relationship that required separate calendars, excuses and lies to maintain the facade. Harry felt his heart racing and flinched back as if on instinct. "You've been lying to me for months," he finally said in a low voice laden with way more weight than any yell. Meghan did not confirm or deny. She grabbed her sparkling water calmly, unscrewed the cap and took a slow sip, as if to simply buy time. But the fact was apparent: the other man was no longer a phantom in their lives. Harry was watching his name, his words, his power dropping away. The woman whom he had felt completely his. Now the issue wasn't only who this man was, but what Harry would do with the truth. There was a swarming tension between that Harry was finding it difficult to ignore. On either side of the kitchen Harry and Meghan stood apart, one phone on the counter between them like an accusation. The unsaid was becoming burdensome for Harry. They had fought the media, family, politics and public scrutiny as a team for years, and now they were turning on one another. "Say something then," Harry finally snapped, lowly and cutting. His gaze connected with Meghan's for a brief moment and she averted her eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth," he retorted instantly. "The lying truth about who he is, why you've been with him and why you thought you could hide it from me." Meghan squared her shoulders and clicked into her default, collected state. "Come on, you're making a mountain out of a molehill," she replied. Harry closed the distance, his jaw tight. "I've read the messages. I've seen the pictures. There's no way to put a good face on this." For a second her stoic front of composure wavered, as if she were about to reveal the truth, but then she clasped her arms together. "We were just conversing. It was a distraction. I did not want it to be a weird thing." Harry's raised tone wasn't quite shouts, but it was sharp with his aggravation. You have been sneaking out, sending out nude photos, making plans to go on secret trips, and telling lies about where and how you are going. That's not complicated. That's betrayal. Her jaw clenched once more. You don't know what I've been through. The isolation, the pressure, he cut her off. Don't make an excuse of it. I've been under pressure all my life. It's no justification for betrayal. These had hit Meghan with a wallop of surprise. Not like that, she muttered dimly, without any great conviction. Harry moved closer to the counter, his hands spread across it. Then explain it to me. Why did I have to hear it from a burner phone? Explain to me why you did that, why you risked everything we have built together. The weight of Meghan's silence was in the air. She looked at him, seeking something on his face that she could not find. He rose, his wounding cooling into something more icy. You've humiliated me. Not only as a husband, but as the person who trusted you despite the warnings of all. I spoke up on behalf of you with my family, my friends, to countless strangers that I will never meet, and you freeloaded behind my back. There was a pause and Meghan's voice came eerily calm. I never meant it to get to this extent. Harry shook his head. That's the issue. You prepared enough so it can begin. Their eyes met for a long moment, and they both knew they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The room was suddenly less bright, the air somehow thicker, as though the house itself seemed to know how irreversible what was happening was. Finally, Harry broke the silence. Her eyes widened slightly. What? You heard me? I cannot look at you at this very moment. I can't even be in the same room as you, she said. She didn't stir at first, as if to gauge whether he was bluffing, but the rigid line of his jaw hair made it plain that he wasn't. She did not say another word, but instead turned to leave through the entrance. Her high heels rang out on the wood floor, each step like a door slamming between them. Harry had not moved, except to place his hands once more on the counter, when the door in front of him closed. The phone was in front of him once more, the black screen bouncing his own face back toward him for the first time. He'd felt the full weight of what he'd unearthed since he had first brought it home. This wasn't just a fight. This was the beginning of something perhaps beyond repair. Harry remained standing in the kitchen long after the front door slammed, the quiet of the house echoing louder than any sound they could have made. It was one of those silences that comes after an explosion, the kind in which you can still smell the smoke, still feel the heat, still see, in every direction, the bits of what used to be a whole lying everywhere. His hands, splayed on the countertop still, hurt from the effort of not breaking it down. The phone was only a few inches away, lifeless yet powerful. When his eyes fell on it, he was flooded with impulses both competing and conflicting. Withdrawing it against the wall, locking it up, or continuing to scroll until you could scroll no more. A part of him wanted to see the complete depth of the betrayal, while the other half begged to shut it out completely and save from feeding the festering wound. He shoved away from the counter and moved to pace, each step an attempt to let out the tightly wound energy inside him. The house now felt unfamiliar. The soft stream of light that slipped from the windows no longer glowed with warmth, but mockingly. Every framed photo, every shared memory dispersed throughout the rooms had suddenly been soiled. He saw all that they had built up as not a fortress but a stage with painted scenery that masked the emptiness it was built round. The spaces that had been filled with shock only mere minutes ago were beginning to be replaced with anger. And the many times that he'd stood by her, lost friends defending her, alienated family members who questioned her loyalty or veracity, came back to haunt him. Each one of those had felt now like a self-inflicted wound he had blindly cut into himself. He stopped at the entrance of the living room, his sight gliding over a neat line of boxes on the floor off to the side table, press materials Meghan had accumulated from her most recent projects, brand samples, the event cards and invites she'd been sent. He realized it was just one more component of the carefully constructed facade she had worked so hard to build. For this image, Harry had thrown away relationships, public credibility, and his peace of mind. Now, it seemed, it had only served as a facade for something grim. Harry sank into one of the armchairs, leaning forwards with his elbows on his knees and his hands on his knees, and his hands fastened together. Adrenaline pounded his thoughts clear and sharp, a caged lover with no release. He delved into the practicalities. What would happen to the house if she moved away for good? How about the staff? Their shared charities? And the other big question, when would the press uncover what had gone so horribly rotten? Harry realized that secrets were largely impossible to keep, and when they came out, the consequences were never benign. He saw the coming media frenzy. Brutal headlines, rampant speculation, mixed opinions. Their own personal struggles would be exposed for the world to dissect, a drama that would not disappear quietly, but rather feed off the attention paid to every photograph, every public appearance, every little quirk in behavior. The idea of those whispery soothsaying long-distance calls was exacerbating his nervousness. The edge of his father's disappointment seeping into William's skeptical tones, hidden inside it, maybe there would be satisfaction that Harry had broken away from family precedent. The expectation of such talks roused an uneasy curiosity in Harry. He returned to the kitchen, picked up the receiver and this time locked it in a drawer, shutting it securely from view. Not out of sight, it was a moment to catch his breath. He poured himself a drink, the ice clinking loudly in the glass. The fiery sip brought him instantly back to reality. This wasn't a dream, wasn't something an apology or mea culpa could fix. It marked the breakage point. As his walls began to crumble the tiniest bit, and the world outside the gate dared to be seen through the cracks, a tiny little voice whispered to him to wait until he was absolutely sure before he acted on anything that could not be undone. But a louder voice insisted immediate action, throw her out. Call the attorneys, protect what's left. He should have taken comfort in it, but he was not further uplifted by looking out the window down at the nicely trimmed lawn and out at the wide ocean. The image was an empty one, a future bereft of its appeal. Now that the truth was out, for the first time, he was starting to imagine the estate without her in it, not as a threat, but as a possibility. The signs of change were there before Meghan came back. The staff of course felt the prickly tension, the lack of easy camaraderie. Harry had always been on first-name terms with the household staff, addressing them informally, where it was very different at Palace. Harry was in a seriously bad mood after the early battle. He grew serious and efficient, barking short, direct orders now. By noon, he discreetly directed the house manager to clear and set up the guest suite without explanation, then sent the party upstairs for a professional recording session. 1 hour later Harry ordered Meghan's personal belongings be relocated from the master suite to the spare room. When Meghan did return later that day, the usually busy house was creepy, still, the staff not looking at us and little signs of life around the halls. While Harry was standing in the office, expressionless, as he said to Meghan, "Your things are now in the spare room." Realizing he was serious, Meghan didn't argue and silently went upstairs, endeavoring to stay confined to the guest room for the remainder of the day. Harry remained inside the study or in the yard on the patio, laptop spread out but largely unused. A tacit approval replaced a greeting when they saw one another in the hallway, for the shift did not go unnoticed outside the walls. The next day, one of Meghan's old friends, one of the frequent guests, sent Harry a cautious text asking if everything was okay. Greatest concern was that Harry would somehow think this had all been a trap. Without saying anything, Harry's friend then WhatsApped Meghan. Soon afterward the news whispered through their coterie that something had happened of real importance. Then, Harry's phone pinged with calls from sources he knew, 2 former military colleagues, a former royal aide and an American pal, who has been by his side since he moved to California. Each of them asked the same query trying to make sense of what was happening. Harry, however, was coy, holding some details close to the vest for the time being. He wanted to control who knew the details, so he could control the narrative in his household. The staff were careful not to gossip in Harry's presence, but whispered to one another in the kitchen or the laundry. They shared their different ideas. Some people heard bits of conversation, raised voices, and the sound of a door being closed with force. Some had seen Harry with the strange, black phone before it went missing in the part of the world discretion was paramount for the work. The electricity was so thick, you could have cut it into triangles and it still wouldn't have been halfway through the night. The housekeeper has a particular memory of one such moment. As she thought back through the day, she remembered that she went to the guest room to take fresh towels. Meghan cracked the door, accepted the towels and didn't invite her in. Meghan looked a little too sharp as she thanked Kurt. In the inside of the room there was chaos as open suitcases, clothes strewn over the bed mattresses and antiques on the left-hand side. Harry, meanwhile, began planning things logistically. He called a lawyer he previously done business with when he made the phone call sound as a hypothetical conversation about property rights and separations. He also told his security staff to review access to the estate, and to make it possible to alter codes and permits, should it prove necessary. The hours rolled on, and then all the inmates of the house knew that a great and unalterable change had come. For the most part, meals were no longer consumed together, and doors were more frequently closed than opened. Even the dogs appeared to pick up on the tension, alternating between lying at Harry's feet in the study and cuddling up to Meghan in the guest suite. A house was no longer home, but two homes were in one house. For those who knew them well, it was no longer a matter of when this split would become public. When word circulates faster at court than through official pipelines, it tends to come from surprising places. In this case, an innocent-sounding message of tension in Montecito somehow made its way to someone at Clarence House as suddenly swathes of coverage suggested there was a major rift between Harry and Meghan. At first, it was reported with due skepticism, as are all rumors about the Sussexes, but there was a darker development when a second source in Los Angeles confirmed the news, via a contact of a trusted royal aide. Even though he didn't know the details, the implication was obvious: something significant had happened, something more than an argument between husband and wife. By the next morning, whispers reached King Charles himself. In a private audience with the king's private secretary passed him a stigmatic message about it. His expression, after a close perusal, was one of anxiety, as he replaced the paper in his pocket. Then, in a classified setting, he asked for an update and was met with a response that was both guarded and telling. Harry was said to have discovered what he believed to be incriminating evidence of infidelity. King Charles, who knew that scandals involving members of his family were explosive personal subjects and that impetuosity of judgment would be ruinous, preserved a calm front. With enough of his share of tempestuous court plotting, he understood caution could be more prudent than urgency in those situations. Yet he knew the charge was serious. The monarchy was also a sad, rickety institution, and Harry's scandalous marriage only made it more complicated. In the meantime, at Kensington Palace, Prince William got the news from an unlikely source. Instead of requesting quick information, he considered calling his brother as well. Recalling previous failed private reconciliations, he realized the implications of what was happening. Whispers of California trouble leaked out, leading to some discreet discussions behind closed palace doors. The attention has expanded beyond the allegations of infidelity to a string of questions about Harry's future in California, about Meghan's own role in official family events if the marriage comes to an end, and about the knock-on effect on their titles and patronage. These talks formed the base for contingency planning. Palace public relations strategists began in the background to formulate possible statements. None of the drafts were made official, but they varied from communicating, in private, concerns from the family to more neutral notes of recognition about changes within the Sussex household. Language was deliberately vague, hoping to claim time and space should the press prize the issue out into the open, beyond family confidences. The narratives began to filter through to people of influence, who had been supportive of the Sussexes in the past. And here in London, a well-connected socialite received a message from a mutual friend in Los Angeles, who subtly suggested, as so many of the well-to-do have a tendency to do, that Meghan could soon be coming back to the UK without Harry. One starlet that Meghan had teamed up with for a charity event sent the Duchess a message asking whether she was all right. The reply he received was assuredly vague, "I'm doing okay, but just a lot going on right now." Meanwhile, Harry was pointedly silent toward his family. He'd made no contact with his father, no attempt at messaging William or speaking to anyone at home about the latest news. He was a little suspicious, but he had a feeling that they knew about it. All this was pressure in itself. From thousands of miles away, Harry could sense the scrutiny tightening as others wondered how to handle the public aftermath. The household climate in Montecito was one of discord, now compounded. Harry knew that the first wave of this upheaval had already swept across the Atlantic. With each hour that passed without our having a leak to the press, we felt as if we were living on borrowed time. The timing of the ticking clock had warned him that the wheels were turning behind the palace walls for the skirmish to come one day. The first public ripple didn't come from a sensational headline or urgent news alert, but from a low-key post on a late-night celebrity gossip forum tucked among threads discussing Oscar red carpet dresses and Hollywood film casting rumors. The post suggested, once again without the clear mention of names, that a royal marriage in California was on the verge of collapse after a secret second phone was discovered. Soon enough, a middle-of-the-road gossip blog known for unscrambling mysteries from the celebrity world picked up the post. Although carefully phrased and making no specific accusations or confirmed identities, those au fait with the former Sussex story will understand to whom Montecito and a high-profile couple are referring to. The friend sparked Harry's attention with a message asking if he'd seen the article, and Harry followed the link. While the fact that we had no juicy specifics did provide him with a modicum of relief, he also knew that the whispering tapestry of cyber speculation was rarely kept under wraps for long. Once sown, these insinuations grew quickly, taking on a life storylines that could be just as harmful as the truth. At midday, the unofficial buzz around social media hovering around hashtags had started to murmur. Some were indirect, others were direct. On forums, users posted side-by-side images of Harry and Meghan during recent public appearances, picking out moments when their closeness and natural smiles appeared to wane. Hobbies: body language analysis amateur, SP, body language analysis Petite Trickett avoided opening her mouth the whole press conference, Blue Falcon is her brother, HOO boy. The Trivinity slithered in from across the pond to analyze our press conference from the UK. The tabloids started to circle, reported contacting every contact they had in California. Paparazzi began setting up long-lens picospheres along the windy roads outside of the Grand Sussex estate, eager to snap a photograph or two that might serve to confirm or refute certain reports. The first official media mention came 2 days after the post on a gossip forum, when a British tabloid published a delicately worded piece under the headline "Tension in Montecito." A source revealed things weren't so rosy for the royal couple, citing they had an explosive argument and that Meghan was flying under the radar a little, reports unnamed sources. There wasn't any direct mention of any rift or unfaithfulness, but for the more seasoned reader, the message was read between the lines. Harry was alone in his study as he read the article. Every equivocal phrase felt like a ticking time bomb, bringing us one sentence closer to the eventual explosion in which the entire truth would be revealed. Harry knew the press's game, and how they would release little tidbits, each one just enough to whet the appetites of their readers. The truth, he understood, would reveal itself in stages, not in one fell swoop. And one by one, as each more devastating than the last news item filtered through, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. In contrast, Meghan took a different approach, spending hours on her laptop talking to a small number of sympathetic individuals in the media. Harry was unsure of what she was talking about but knew she was already weaving her version of things. Sowing her own seeds of story before the last of his names, Meghan gently tiptoed through the mounting tension between them, transitioning from personal torment to a tactical weariness. In the rare times when they did speak, their conversations revolved entirely around the banalities of life, logistics, meals, schedules, household business. Both delicately danced around the existential threat embodied in the headlines. Instead of confronting the issue head-on, it was almost as if not speaking its name would make it go away. But outside their walls the storm was brewing. And as a celebrity entertainment reporter tantalizingly tweeted ominous tidings of impending royal strife having nothing to do with William or Kate, the online world convulsed with speculation. The post was quickly shared by thousands of people, leading to a social media frenzy of armchair detectives trying to connect the dots on Meghan's whereabouts, including dubious sightings in unusual locations. Harry could feel the pressure building, the walls closing in on him. Accustomed to that feeling when a story goes whipping out of his control in the press, he was now dealing with another variety of chaotic outbreak, one that extended beyond whether he just needed to protect his public image or tamp down the headlines. And this time, the story was intimately connected to his own emotions. There would be no way to separate the man from the scandal once the whole thing unspoolled. Harry had always thought of himself as tough, capable of taking punches and going on. Decades in the public eye had trained him to expect unrelenting scrutiny, loss and betrayal by those in whom he'd placed his trust. But nothing in Petros's checkered past compared to this sense of betrayal that did not come from a business or a stranger, not even a family member. It was from the man he had chosen to stand with him against the world. The Montecito estate, once his haven, now seemed as though it was closing in on him, suffocating him. The silence was unnatural, not soothing, a constant glaring reminder of the void. Their light moments, the mere act of passing in the hall and exchanging a touch, out the door. In its stead, a frigidly formal truce desecrated the silent feeling of brotherly love that was there before. It hurt more than any argument could. Harry spent half the day walking around aimlessly and starting and then abandoning tasks with minutes. The desk was piled with half-written emails, open notebooks and an abandoned mug of lukewarm tea, long gone cold hours before. Even the dogs seemed to sense his melancholy. They followed him without that usual explosion of energy. Nights didn't offer peace, rest was stolen, filled with uneasy dreams of her, carefree laughter lapping up to another, words lost in a hushed whisper. He would sometimes have to get up to quiet his pounding heart. He wasn't sure if it was in a dream or if it was just something that he remembered seeing from that god-awful phone. The cell phone's very presence stuck in his head. He'd pushed it down after his confrontation and yet it still felt to him like a sick landmine buried under his floorboards. Every so often, he'd catch himself wondering what it would be like to unlock it again and scroll through messages in search of an explanation for the betrayal. But in his heart, he knew there was no explanation to be found. His mind drifted back to the decision to quit the firm, the sacrifices and the burning of bridges. How many of those decisions had been shaped by an idealized image of happy life with Meghan that proved to be nothing more than a mirage? He had abandoned his one known existence for the faith that he had in her and in their common future. And now, standing in the wake of that decision, he questioned whether it was an illusion he had been chasing all along. Telephone inquiries from anxious friends and faint relatives went unheeded, even by such relatives as might have sympathized with his misfortune and distress. He didn't have enough persistence to respond to their questions or take in their well-meant advice. The platitudes about resilience, the clichés about overcoming, didn't resonate. What he wanted, what he yearned for was clarity. But clarity remained elusive. Just when he thought he was past the betrayal, a new memory would pop up about her. One day when she'd been overly affectionate, a talk during which she'd said exactly what he'd wanted, needed, to hear. And once inside, he would envision those scenes, wonder which ones were real, and which were performance pieces, staged within the costume and makeup of the other, her true self yet another layer buried deep inside. His emotional stress began to take a physical toll. He started to skip meals without realizing it, losing weight without trying. His eyes, which typically looked sharp and focused, now resembled dull mirrors. Stephen worked out, his normal go-to stress reduction tool, but running laps around his property or lifting weights in his home offered no peace. The gym had only sapped him of energy, he wasn't at all alleviated of stress like before. But in the heaviness of it all, one smoldering ember of something more powerful emerged: anger. It was a slow boil, with the heat increasing as the days passed, the media becoming more and more brazen with implications. Rage at her for what she had done, at himself for not having realized sooner, at all the reasons that had herded him into a corner, where every step he took must have seemed another trap to fall on. It was in this agitated, spent condition with an undercurrent of smoldering anger that he started pondering the future, not just in their marriage but in his whole life. If the whole truth were to come out, if the public were to throw it back at him, he would have a decision to make: stay silent and take a beating, hit back, or get ahead of the story before it consumed him whole. He realized that the first step toward accomplishing that was far beyond just confronting Meghan. It meant reckoning with the elements of who he was that led him to trust in something that might never have actually existed. It all started in the most uneventful way, with some calls going unreturned and some messages ignored. People within Harry and Meghan's shared social orbit, celebrities, philanthropists, former colleagues, and those who met the couple since their arrival in California, already noticed a change even before Harry or Meghan said a word, in settings where reputation was everything. It was impossible not to notice any shift between two leading characters. The first signs came from Meghan. Two of her best friends, big guns in LA's culture scene, one a heavy hitter in fashion and the other in entertainment, began popping up in her photos more and more. Pictures of dinners out, casual coffee dates, and charity events were posted with captions that subtly crowned her as a woman of strength and surrounded by love. It was implied, if not openly so. She was making herself the chronic victim, instead of its cause. Harry observed it, but did not respond in any way. Privately, however, he was bothered by the optics. He saw that Meghan was powerful at getting narratives created and gaining support quickly. It wasn't just charisma, it was a strategy. Now, that same strategy was turning against him within his own camp. More gradual was the shift in the dynamics. Old pals from his days in the military came by to talk, keeping it loose, but so subtly signaling a willingness to listen, never pressing for details. A couple of the celebrities he had worked with on mental health campaigns also sent him quietly supportive messages, small but significant ones, messages that counted without needing to be counted in public. One friend, a London buddy who never really took to Meghan, was blunt. "If you want to leave, depart cleanly," the message said. "The longer you drag out this political performance, the harder it is going to be to get you confirmed." Harry said nothing, but the words struck home with him. If it was a society cleavage that was widening, it began to show in divergent invitations. Activities that had featured Harry and Meghan now simply applied to one of them instead. A dinner at a Hollywood producer's home went on without Harry, with Meghan showing up with one of her allies. By contrast, a private polo match that Harry played in and to which he took a guest list of 200 included no mention of Meghan, tipping his staff to the rift. Some people came for Meghan, they would barely interact with Harry beyond at official engagements. Others, feeling shifting power dynamics, had backed away from her, quietly checking on Harry and making sure he was looked after even when he missed meals. The first significant moment came a few months later when a mutual friend, one of the few neutral parties left, invited them both to a charity auction. Meghan turned it down, but one of them went to see Harry by himself. He experienced some relief for the first time in months, but the undercurrents remained. The conversations that had first been about the situation were now careful inquiries about how Harry was doing, and whether things had gotten better at home. The rumors were not directly discussed, the eyes, however, made it clear. At Montecito, just as in their wider social circle, the feeling in the house reflected the schism. The guest room that Meghan now occupied was commandeered Khloe's personal space, overrun with deliveries, clothes, beauty products, books, from brands and friends who stood by her. Harry was cold as ice, speaking to her only in brief logistical exchanges, the minimum required to share a space. Whatever was to become of them, it was clear that it would not be in secret. Too many people had stakes in the game, with alliances forged and public images heavily invested in how they related to each other. The fight for truth was not just between the two anymore. And now the battle was being fought in dinner conversations, Instagram posts and furtive phone calls beyond their reach. Harry knew only too well how once people picked sides, reconciliation was more and more unlikely. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more breaking royal updates. Stay tuned, because the drama is far from over.